Got it. Okay, fantastic. So let me share my screen to get started here, which I think will mean my face is going to pop away, but that is quite all right. Let me try that one more time. Okay, and I just want to make sure you all can see this. So if you could someone just chime in? The PowerPoint is showing.
Yes, it's showing. I can see it.
Okay, great. So this is my presentation on women in guitar. I want to do a little bit of history on the classical guitar. So the forerunners to this instrument is the oud, which really started in Spain. The Moors brought it into Spain. Another instrument called the vihuela, maybe you've heard of it, the Spanish vihuela, or the guitarn. This is in like the 16th and 15th century. You can see the picture right to the right. This later evolved into the 17th and 18th century to a Baroque guitar. All these instruments, in particular the Spanish Baroque guitar, much smaller than what we would see in a typical guitar these days. These three instruments kind of evolved into what we think of as the modern guitar, the modern classical guitar, in like the mid-19th century. So I want to talk a little bit about classical guitar and someone named Segovia. And I know this is women in guitar, but I do want to touch on this one man because he was really the person that put classical guitar on the map as an instrument of real import, an instrument that was worthy of academia. And he's really known as the father of classical guitar. So he helped make guitar a legitimate instrument. Segovia's first tour of North America was in 1928. And this is really the start of the rise of classical guitar. Guitar is much more associated with other genres such as country, jazz, rock and roll, and even into the 60s. He helped progress the attitude of guitar as an academic instrument. I mean, nowadays, including where I go to school, most music schools have a guitar department or a guitar school, or there's some classical guitarists that has founded a department, but that really wasn't the case until Segovia. So I bring him up because I posed the question a few years ago when I started some research on women in classical guitar. While this is good, guitar is very dominated by men, in particular white men. Who are other important voices in classical guitar that are not men? So let's just watch a little video of Segovia. He's talking a bit. His English isn't great. He's playing a piece called, it's variations on a aria from Mozart's The Magic Flute by a composer named Fernando Sor. I actually played this piece for my master's recital just about a year ago. So I just want you to hear a little bit of him playing, and if you've never heard a classical guitarist play, just a little bit of that. So let's bring up that YouTube.
Play the guitar. I usually answer long before I was born, because my love for music and the guitar comes to me from far back. The guitar was introduced in Spain many centuries ago. It found there its permanent home. For its tone is of a melancholic nature, like the soul of the Spanish people. I am going to play Fernando Sor's theme and variation. He was born in Spain and lived between the 18th and the 19th century.
Okay, you guys can see the PowerPoint now, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so on we go. Let's start talking about women in guitar. So Maria Luisa Enido, 1907 to 1996. So someone that's not necessarily current day, but somebody that was alive not that long ago and a contemporary of Segovia. But we can say for whatever reason doesn't get the recognition that Segovia does. And we can hypothesize for all sorts of reasons why that is. My guess is one reason is because she is a woman. So she was born in 1907 in Argentina. She studied with Domingo Prat in Argentina and Miguel Llobet in Spain. If you're a classical guitarist, Llobet is a very famous composer that we play a lot of his music with. So the fact that she has studied with him is a big deal. She also frequently performed in Argentina together with him. In her first London appearance, this was 1952 at the Wigmore Hall. And then she spent several years in the 60s performing and teaching in Russia. And then she later became a professor at the Conservatory of Buenos Aires in Argentina. So to me, this is a story of a woman that was able to study with some of the biggest names in guitar and establish an amazing career for herself and sort of hit a home run as a classical guitarist of acquiring a professor job. But why don't we hear her name as much as we hear Segovia? Okay, here's a little video of her now. We might have an ad, we might not. I'm not exactly sure. Yes.
Are we ready?
Okay, and listening to something like that, she's playing Bach. That is a prelude from Bach's first cello suite arranged for guitar. Clearly not any less capable of a player that of a man, but for whatever reason, we don't hear her name as much. The next woman I'm going to talk about is Ada Presti, also a contemporary of Segovia and Enodo. She died in 1967. She's a French guitarist, and she, I think, has gained a little bit more prestige than other female guitarists of this time. She played in public when she was only 8 years old and gave her Paris debut when she was only 10. And while still in her teens, she was already touring abroad. She did concerts for Paganini, who's a very famous composer, and Berlioz. And she played on those composers' own guitars. Her first recordings were made in her teens, just at 14. And this is a really big deal. There is a guitar concerto by Joaquin Rodrigo called Concerto de Aranjuez. And I'll talk a little bit more about this concerto later on. It's a very, very famous concerto in general, and very much a staple for guitar repertoire. And she gave the French premiere of it in 1948. Her personal life is also important to her professional life as a guitarist. In 1952, she married Alexander Lagoya, and pretty much as her career only played as a duo with him. You know, they celebrated global tours, which ended with her very tragic death. That there's still some uncertainty about the exact cause. While she was in the United States, she's known for her musicality, very nuanced musicality. There's very beautiful, really warm sound she plays, and it really brought her to prestige along with her husband. So here's a bit of that. Let me bring up the YouTube.
What is going on?
I can't afford streaming anymore, so.
Sure you can. Stay.
Oops, I don't want to stop the share. Yeah, so that's some of the couple doing what they did best. Always interesting to watch their duo performances, because you know they're not even looking at each other, which is typically to me sometimes a bad sign of an ensemble if they're not communicating by looking at each other. But they're sort of the minority where it's not a sign of bad musicality. They probably just, you know, have played with each other so much and know each other's musical tendencies so in and out that they don't even have to. Okay, on we go to a classical guitarist that is alive and well, Sharon Isbin. She is the founding professor of a guitar department at Juilliard. She's certainly one of the most important classical guitarists of our time. And as of today, she has over 30 albums. Okay, so why is she important? She is female. She is also gay. Classical guitar is historically a very white, a very straight, cisgender, male-dominated world. So is her being female and being gay maybe the first thing that she wants to be noted for? Probably not. But with that said, to sort of make it to her level as a female and as a gay female, to me, like there's something to be said about that and something we should dive in a little bit more. So I chose to explore some questions. How has her persona as a performer morphed throughout her career after she came out publicly? How has her queerness impacted or not impacted musical and other professional endeavors, her decisions on those things? And does queerness impact the repertoire she chooses to play? So her public coming out, she did a 1995 interview with Out Magazine. I put it, you obviously can't read it, but just because I thought it was such a beautiful artistic picture of her, that is the magazine article of when she's publicly coming out. She describes the hardship of just being a woman in classical guitar, especially as a young woman, and how it kind of, forced her to have this fighting spirit to keep getting through, the roadblocks and, showing up to master classes or performances or festivals. And she might be one of 50 out of 50 people. She might be the only female there. She comes out as a lesbian, which she talks about how she wrestled with for over a year if she should come out publicly. And a direct quote she says that I thought was interesting is, I think it's really important that people be open, because only through openness will there be any acceptance in the society. I hate the word tolerance. The word accepting is far more appetizing. A week after her public coming out, she gave a performance in Atlanta, Georgia, and the audience gave her a standing ovation before she even played a note. So, as she walked out on stage with her guitar, the audience stood up and clapped before she even performed. So obviously that is a sign of support. And she described how it kind of forced her to address, she was so terrified, and rightfully so, of the homophobia she might experience in the world and in her community, but forced to address her own homophobia in herself. What if she was rejected? We could talk for 5 hours about this, but just a first, few thoughts that I had as someone, like me growing up, looking to female guitarists and, possibly being queer as well as, a role model. Young people would just not have that. And then we wouldn't have, not only voices, but musical voices, and people who are tremendously talented, putting out their own artistic work out into the world. Okay, so a little bit of, there we go. Did I skip one? No, I did not. Okay, a little bit of crossing over into another discipline that I thought was just kind of fun. There was a TV show called The L Word that I believe has been rebooted. They're doing like a rethink on that. But she actually guest stars on it. So The L Word was a groundbreaking, very dramatic TV show that centered on the life of a group of queer women, and not just women, but non-binary folks, trans folks, which was I was just a kid then, but very groundbreaking for the time. And as a professional in the world, to decide to guest star on that as an actress, where she's not an actress, to me is a real decision. So she plays herself and she performs some Latin music in the show, the nightclub that they kind of all always hang out at, called The Planet. She performs. And you think, why did she do this? What are the benefits to both parties? At this point, she had been out publicly for a chunk of years. But she hadn't been out for like 30 years or anything. So at some point, maybe there wasn't this big reason. But the fact that she did this, I think, shows the audience that she is comfortable with herself, and she knows it's something of import to have representation, even if it is for a drama filled like Showtime or whatever network HBO show that's on. So she actually posted on Instagram less than 6 months ago, sort of like a throwback Thursday type deal of some pictures of her and the cast in a scene. So let me bring that up. Here we go.
This is my sister Kit. Kit, this is Lee, and this is Valerie. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi. What a coup to have Sharon Isbell.
Oh, yeah, my friend Benjamin hooked it up. He thought she'd be perfect for the kind of music we do in here. And you should see the flowers he sent.
That's your sister? The one who just broke up with her partner?
So,
She's beautiful. Introduce me to her and...
So kind of silly, maybe, but also I think of great import. Okay, on we go. Now talking about her brother Neil. So I met Sharon Isbell probably in 2012, 2013. She was performing somewhere in Michigan. And of course, I went to go listen to her play. And then my professor at the time at Oakland University kind of got us backstage. And she was so wonderful and gracious. I didn't realize she had a brother that was also gay and that died of AIDS in the 90s, in 1996. So I didn't realize that years after when I started to do this research, which I felt, to be honest, very silly for, because I think that was probably such a formative experience for her. He was a fierce gay rights activist in New Mexico. He requested Isbin's recording of the middle movement Adagio from the concerto we talked about previously, Rodrigo's Concerto de Aranjuez, to be played at his memorial service. I think today, if you walk away with anything, walk away with the beauty of this second movement. So let me bring this up. Okay, and just for the sake of time, I'll keep it moving. If you have time, I would listen to the movement, the Adagio from Rodrigo's Concerto de Aranjuez in its full, because it is quite beautiful. Okay, on we go. Some more of her collaborations, which she is certainly known for in the classical guitar community. She really pushes the boundaries with the genres she collaborates with, the people she collaborates with. And one of her albums is called Guitar Passion, Sharon Isbin and Friends. I'm not going to say too much about it because the YouTube is actually, it's like a bit of a trailer of what the album is going to be. But on this album, she collaborates with other guitarists and other musicians of all sorts of genres, like rock guitarist Steve Vai. If you're in to rock music, Steve Vai is a guitar hero of mine. Jazz guitarist Stanley Jordan, Nancy Wilson from Heart, and so much more. So I think the YouTube does it much more justice than I ever can. So let's bring that up.
I wanted to celebrate the guitar with this CD and to celebrate it with great friends who are amazing guitarists. And together we're just sharing with you our passion for the instrument.
If I had an opportunity to actually perform in front of people with this guitar,
it gives me a chance to play with people that I've really admired for years.
Whoops.
Rock guitarist Steve Vai. Steve is one of the premier legends in the rock guitar world.
It's not even like apples and oranges what we do. It's like apples and beef yogurt or something.
And I invited Steve to improvise a part to a work by Agustin Barrios Mangoré. We brought together electric guitar, steel string, nylon string, acoustic.
Anything you can add.
Nancy Wilson from Heart. In college, I used to listen to her albums all the time, and Dreamboat Annie was a particular favorite. So that's the one we chose to do together in the CD.
Heading out
Paul Winter on soprano sax, and Tiago de Mello, who have been friends and musical colleagues for many years. We do a work that Tiago wrote called O Presidente. We also have Rosa Passos. And Steve Morse, also electric guitar, formerly of the Dixie Dregs.
Oops, sorry about that. Let me try that one more time. Looks like I got a phone call. Okay, I think here is a good place to stop and ask if there's any questions.
I'm not seeing any in the chat. I've got what I'm seeing in the chat is just imagining those feelings she must have had then, and the standing ovation that she got makes me well up.
Oh yeah, I mean, totally agree. And so that was in, late 90s, maybe early 2000s. And of course, I was just a kid. It's hard to know, as I think we've come such a long way. And someone who is gay and non-binary, I mean, even in the last 10 years of, from my life being a teenager to now is, at least from my perspective, it's definitely improved a lot. So I totally agree with that. Other questions or comments?
Not that I can see.
Okay, on we go then. Like I said, she's done a lot of collaborations. Another one of her albums, Journey to the New World, a composer, John Duerte's Joan Baez Suite, Opus 144. This was commissioned and written for Isbin. And Isbin joins forces with Baez herself on this particular album, songs Wayfaring Stranger and Go Away From My Window. It's important to take into account what Baez is known for musically. So her folk music is often songs that have, an extra musical meaning of social activism and protest. So these causes can include civil rights, anti-war, environmental issues, queer issues. So some songs that are included in John Duerte's suite are Once I Had a Sweetheart, Barbara Allen, The House of the Rising Sun, and many others. So this is a great example of, again, has been making musical decisions on, first of all, just what she deems musically interesting. Maybe that's a classical composer composing a suite based on a folk musician's, Joan Baez, music, or just doing, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Progressive duets with a folk musician. But I think she's also making some subtle statements on, what she believes in socially and giving voice to artists that have a loud voice and activism. Okay, a composition I want to talk about is Nocturnal by Benjamin Britten. This is on Isbin's album Nightshade Rounds. This is standard classical guitar repertoire. Like I played it my senior year of my undergrad. Um, it is written for classical guitarist Julian Bream, who died in 2000. Was it 2000? It was 2020 or 2021. I should know this. My apologies. I feel like we all lost a year because of the pandemic, but he died recently, which is a very big deal for classical guitar. The
Yes.
reason I bring up
Do you want to share
go
your screen again?
oh
Or
my goodness, I certainly do. I thought I was.
me?
Let's definitely do that. Okay, just to kind of go back, you did hear everything I had to say about Journey to the New World, correct?
Yep.
Okay, good. So I basically said everything. There's no YouTube for that, but of course, feel free to look it up. Okay, so on to Nocturnal. So like I said, classical guitar composition on Nightshade Rounds, standard classical guitar repertoire, was commissioned and written for Julian Bream, who died recently. The reason I bring up this composition, Britten is a gay composer of the 20th century. And thus far, probably the most famous composer we've talked about. Like Rodrigo, super famous. Trying to think of other, like John Duarte, super famous. But out of like the last 150 years of composition, as like Maggie, I'm sure knows, just like someone who like, is in the music world, like this is just a composer, their name. Um, and I think the importance of this is not lost on Isbin. I find it really, really fulfilling and, sort of as like a baby gay musician myself, that a gay woman classical guitarist who has made it to, the top of every, the top of the world in terms of classical guitar, playing a composition by a gay composer who was in a long-term relationship with Peter Pears. And it was, like widely known in the music community. Like people knew that, but he wasn't out. Like he didn't have an opportunity to be out in the sense that we can be today. I just think that that's very important. Okay, now a more current gay composer, John Corigliano, composition Troubadours by him on her album American Landscapes. This is a concerto and it is featured as a world premiere because it's written for Isbin. He's a prominent current gay composer, as I said. And this is a collaboration of two queer musicians. The story's kind of funny too. She just basically begged the crap out of him to write a guitar piece for her. And like many composers, right before spring break, I was just talking with my guitar professor that so many composers are, scared of writing for guitar. And frankly, he was just scared because it can be, the guitar fretboard is laid out in a strange way, and if you just don't know it, it can be weird. But she basically just kept bugging him and would just send him a bunch of albums and things and resources to use. And finally, he was like, "Okay, fine, I'll do it." And then Troubadours came about. There is a documentary about her too, called Troubadour. And there's many composers featured in this film, singer-songwriters. And what I found that was probably even more interesting than this, I'm not really a sports person, and to be honest, I don't really know a lot about this tennis player, Martina Navratilova, and I'm probably not even pronouncing that right, but she's a professional tennis player who is also gay. She's a lesbian, and she sort of comes at the end of all these musicians and singer-songwriters and composers saying, how groundbreaking Sharon Isbin is. And as a tennis player, it's like I've even felt the impact of, her groundbreaking work into the world of sports. So, it didn't reach just musicians, it also reached queer athletes. Some direct quotes from her. This is an interview with the HuffPost after the documentary. So wouldn't it be a wonderful world if you didn't have to worry about simply wanting the same rights as everyone else, whether it be marriage, whether it be job security, whether it be education opportunity, not to be bullied? I mean, these are basic human rights that we're still fighting for today, and would be wonderful that the world would change and people could really feel free to be who they are and be accepted by their families, be accepted by their colleagues and their friends, to really live their lives without having to worry about a sexual orientation being a determining factor in whether or not they can be accepted or successful. And there should be one more quote. This was an interview that she did the day before the Supreme Court struck down all bans on marriage, which on gay marriage, which, of course, was not that long ago at all. I certainly hope they'll do the right thing and make this an issue that's make this an issue that's available to all citizens, not just half the human race. I don't have any plans to get married myself, but it's certainly very personal in that I believe it's the right of every person to express their love through marriage, and nobody should be denied that opportunity. So she isn't married, but you think of kind of like where she was in the late 90s versus what she's saying on record in, the 2015-ish, 2014, that's sort of when the documentary came out as well. She's definitely becoming more directly vocal about her beliefs and things. Just some more collaborations. I'll go through this quickly. One of her favorite albums of mine is Strings for Peace, explores North Indian classical music, and she collaborates with some of the most influential Indian musicians of our time. And she kind of, she's really passionate about this and explains a connection she realized when she is performing these ragas, which basically are like Indian melodies. Spanish standard classical guitar pieces such as Isaac Albéniz Asturias has a connection to India. The melismatic style of like flamenco music and Spanish music, it really came from like gypsies in India who migrated from Spain and other lands, like very Persian. And I think this is just like a small fact that kind of is again a window into her sort of psyche as a musician and a person. And it seems to just all be about like connection of people, of different people of similar minds. And I think this is just again another piece of evidence that that's important to her. She performed at the White House for the Obamas in 2009. There's some videos of that online. And Michelle Obama even makes commentary on Isbin in the documentary Troubadour. I think she's typically been associated with Democrats and in support of Democrats. It's been in the 80s and 90s. I'll go through this kind of fast. This slide is mostly just me showing that, I'm talking about her a lot as a queer person and sort of the stuff she has done that is collaborative and progressive and all this stuff. But when she was establishing herself and, like a student and this and that, she did all the classical guitar things there are to do. Like if you're a classical guitarist, you're playing Bach. If you're a classical guitarist, you're playing Baroque music. Her album Road to the Sun, a lot of Spanish music is on that, like composers like Tarrega or Brazilian composers like Villalobos, or Isaac Albéniz or Leo Brouwer, Cuban composer. She has her classical guitar answer book that she did in the 90s. Basically, that's just like a technique book, a book of exercises, a book of like, advice on practicing and how to prep for concerts and this and that. A lot of the big classical guitar names have those, like my professor, Lily Afshar, she has like a set of DVDs on that type of stuff. There's a guy named Scott Tennant. Like he has his book called Pumping Nylon, advice, like practicing advice and technique and things like that. So this is really when she was establishing herself. Okay, Let's talk about another classical guitarist, Lily Afshar, who I said was the first woman to receive her doctorate in music and classical guitar. This is my professor in Memphis. She's from Iran. I could read all of this, but she is the winner of many, many awards. And you know, some of them are kind of like female related, some of them are not. Award for Best Female Classical Guitarist. They're recipient of the National Endowment of Arts Recording Award, chosen as an artistic ambassador for the United States Information Agency to Africa. Winner of a lot of awards that have to do with being like a premier guitarist. She has been all over the world teaching master classes at certain halls, at certain universities and festivals. There's really great videos of Lily Afshar and Sharon Isbin playing duets. This is probably the early 2000s at festivals, and you know, she has been to all these different countries, of course, Iran, where she's from, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, England, Poland, United States, and really all over the world. So let's just listen to a bit of her playing. This is Sevilla.
As a struggling actor, I need all the breaks that I can get. At Liberty Buchamode. Cut. Liberty Bibbity.
By Isaac Albanez. Playing, I should have said this before, so this is in her youth, playing for Segovia, who was the first person we talked about, sort of the godfather of guitar. She was probably in her 20s here.
No. Very, very short. A little more. Repeat. Pam, 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 pam. Right.
Okay, so I, of course, am probably a little bit biased towards, you know, I could watch the whole thing because that's my professor. But that's her playing in a master class for, you know, the one and only Segovia. Again, similar to Sharon Isbin's experience, you know, they would show up to these master classes and these festivals and concerts and things like that. And it was really them two in a sea of like, you know, 65 people, and all of them are men. Okay, on we go. Now we're going to get into a little bit more popular music. And I want to say this too, you know, I'm a classical guitarist right now. I'm doing my doctorate in classical guitar. I did not grow up playing classical guitar though. I grew up playing popular music, rock music, folk music, acoustic guitar. I had electric guitars growing up as well. Of course, I still have them. You know, I really didn't even have weekly lessons. I learned once or twice a month from a family friend. So in the classical world, and just kind of on a personal note, even when I started music school, which was a fluke thing altogether, to be honest, there is sort of a sense of high art of classical music, and kind of like a looking down on of, folk music or rock music or popular music. And it's just, of course, not true. And it's just, I think, comes from insecurity. But I think what's cool about someone like Sharon Isbin, and from, I only have so much time for this lecture, but Lily Afshar has done some really cool interactive work with other musicians of other genres, that the acoustic guitar and the electric guitar and some popular music, which we're just about to get into, that has just as much merit and is just as important as what we previously talked about. Okay, so just a brief history of the acoustic guitar. Many of us have probably heard of the brand Martin guitars. A German immigrant to the United States, Christian Martin, is the one who invented this. Guitars at the time used so-called catgut strings, which are created from the intestines of sheep. So that sounds fun. He decided to create a guitar that used steel strings so that banjo players playing then like popular style country music could switch over and it feel sort of the same, like the strings are playing on the banjo feel the same on this guitar. So acoustic guitars, body wise, how they look and how they feel were very similar to classical guitars, but instead of having nylon strings on a classical guitar, it would have these steel strings. So I have a picture to show. The one on the left, it looks like a classical guitar and the body is, but if you zoom up, there are steel strings on that guitar. The picture to the right, looks pretty similar, and just to, the random naked eye, you'd say, oh yeah, those are just two acoustic guitars. As you can see, the very top of the guitar, what we call the head of the guitar, it looks slightly different on each guitar. And the guitar on the right is more of a modern day acoustic guitar. That is, sound is produced acoustically with steel strings. And now just a brief history of the electric guitar. It was like 1930s, getting into the 40s, when jazz guitarist Charlie Christian began using an acoustic guitar with a pickup attached to the body. So he could be loud enough to take guitar solos in his band and not just really be an accompanimental, comping instrument in like a jazz combo. So this is sort of said to be the birth of the electric guitar, a hollow body electric guitar. So there is a problem though, getting feedback. So a clever way to solve feedback is to remove the hollow cavity from the guitar body, making it difficult for sound to resonate. So this led to the creation of the solid body guitar, on which a body is carved from a single piece of wood. So it's exactly like it sounds, hollow body guitar. The body is hollow. A solid body guitar, the body is solid, a solid piece of wood. The first such instrument on the market was designed by Fender, again, a name we've probably at least all heard of, released in 1949 and is now regarded as the first solid body guitar. Electric guitar in its current form is, mostly standard and created by the 1960s. And just a few pictures. Okay, and now getting into some popular music that uses these instruments. So Nancy Wilson, an American musician, I'm sure all of us have at least heard of her, singer, songwriter, producer, and film composer. She rose to fame alongside her older sister Anne as a guitarist and backing vocalist in the rock band Heart. So she's been lauded for her guitar playing. She's a great guitarist. And also noted for, blending her styles of popular music with classical styles and flamenco styles. In 2016, Gibson ranked Wilson the 8th greatest female guitarist of all time. I mean, some of those, like Gibson ranks this or whatever it is, who knows why it's 8 or not 9 or 7. But the point is that she's incredible and is, worldwide known for that. In 2013, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Heart. So let's just listen to a little bit of her guitar playing. Oh, wow. The sound has been removed by the uploader. That was not true the other day. Okay, I'm going to stop the share really fast and then find another video that will be suitable because there's plenty of her playing guitar. Okay. Okay, let me go back and share the screen here. So great technical skill there. You know, there's a lot of popular guitarists that, you know, can't necessarily play like that. And she certainly can. Okay, next person we're talking about is Memphis Minnie. And honestly, the reason I included her is because I spend most of my time in Memphis right now. A blues guitarist, vocalist, and songwriter whose recording career lasted over 3 decades. Queen of country blues. It was kind of said that, you know, people would say it, of course this sounds sort of derogatory, but I think it's worth kind of saying she plays like a boy because she was so good. She recorded over 200 songs. Some include Bumblebee, Nothing and Ramblin'. At the age of 13, she ran away from home to live on Beale Street, of course, in Memphis. She played on the street corners of her teenage years and occasionally returning to her family's farm when she ran out of money. So for, you know, 3 decades, she was very influential in blues. From the early 20s until when she retired in the 50s, she released over 180 songs until her death in 1973. Again, a genre dominated by men. And unlike most female blues singers of the time, she wrote her own songs and played guitar. So, you know, she didn't need really the help of anybody. In particular, a man. She transcended both genre and gender. Like I said, people kind of lauded her of like she played like a boy. And in the Memphis Music Hall of Fame, she is recognized there. If you're ever in Memphis, check it out. I need to as well. And here is just a bit of her playing and her music.
Thanks to the Kroger app, you can get prices that are lower than low.
have you take a boot and turn to a brand new shoe. But don't put that thing on me. Don't put that thing on me. Don't put that thing on me, 'cause I'm going back to Tennessee. Oh, do lady, you can turn water to wine. I've been wondering where have you been all this time. I'm sitting here broke, and I ain't got a dime. You all could put something in these dukes of mine. But don't put that thing on me. Don't put that thing on me. Don't put that thing on me, 'cause I'm going back to Tennessee. Boy, you better watch her, 'cause she's tricky.
Okay, so just super great music. Okay, on we go for the sake of time. All right, next one we're talking about is Joan Jett. So American rock singer, songwriter, composer, musician, record producer, and actress. She's best known as the front woman of her band, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Also for her earlier founding and performing with the Runaways, which recorded and released the hit song Cherry Bomb. I'm sure many of us, if not all of us, have heard. With the Blackhearts, Jett is known for her rendition of the song I Love Rock and Roll. And she's kind of noticed as the queen of rock and roll. In 2015, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think one thing that is interesting about her is I think she always, I don't want to say claps back at the media, but she's just such an example of a strong woman and a strong musician that is not letting another outlet decide who she is as a person and as a musician. For years, she kind of refused to either confirm or deny that she is gay or bisexual. In a 1994 interview with Out magazine, she said, "I'm not saying no, I'm not saying yes, I'm saying believe what you want, assume, go ahead." In 2006, she responded to an interviewer who had asked her when she had come out as a lesbian by saying, "I never made any kind of statement about my personal life on any level, never made any proclamation, so I don't know where people are getting that from." I think that she's just a really good example for someone who probably just wants to make music in her life and sort of not be told that she has to look, sound, and do a certain way. And I love that about her. So let's listen to a little bit. Should be coming up. It's lagging just a bit. Come on now. There we go.
The reason I was attracted to the guitar was really what I heard on the radio. It was very specific, rhythm guitar I wanted to play. Because it was similar to the drums in a way, because when you lock in with a drummer, it's hard to explain. I just knew I wanted to make those sounds, and it was a physical thing. Almost like hitting a baseball, which I'm a big baseball fan, so it's similar. I asked for an electric guitar for Christmas when I was 13. My parents, they actually got it for me. It was a Sears guitar, and that's what I banged around on in my room in the basement. My earliest memory is just of making loud sounds on Christmas morning, just going, bow, bow, bow. You know, just making noise, and it was, felt great. And watching my father's face was funny. After I got this electric guitar for Christmas, I wanted to learn how to play. So I went to a guitar teacher, but I remember being very exuberant and saying, "Teach me how to play rock and roll, teach me how to play rock and roll." And instead of saying something like, "Well, okay, we got to learn the basics first, so let me teach you chords or something." He didn't say that. He said, "Girls don't play rock and roll. Let me teach you on top of Old Smoky." And after that lesson, it really dawned on me, even at that age, that what he was saying wasn't that girls can't master the guitar and play rock and roll because I'm in school with girls playing cello, violin, symphony music, Bach and Beethoven. So I never went back to him, and I just bought one of those learn how to play guitar by yourself books that taught you a few basic chords, play along with some records. That's really the way I learned until I got out to California and met up with other girls that wanted to play too. Formed a band, the Runaways. What rock and roll meant to me at that time was acceptance. I thought girls would be accepted in that world, and I was wrong. Freedom, travel. It wasn't about being famous. It was just about being in a band and touring and, you know, putting a record out and all that stuff. Yeah, if you got famous, great, but it was more about the music.
Okay, just for the sake of time, I think that's just such a great interview, and I think just sums up sort of her essence really, really well. Okay, on to Joni Mitchell, Canadian singer, songwriter, composer, instrumentalist, and painter. You know, just when you think someone can't be more talented, they are. Drawing from folk, pop, rock, classical, and jazz, Mitchell's songs often reflect on social um, and other very like philosophical ideas and very much to the human experience, I would say. You know, the human experience of romance and kind of coming of age and joy and all of those things. She, of course, has received many accolades, including 9 Grammy Awards, an induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in '97. Rolling Stone called her one of the greatest songwriters ever, which I sincerely agree with. And really, I say one of the most important and influential female recording artists of the late 20th century. There's a lot of YouTubes of Joni Mitchell I could choose, but I chose this one. It's a live performance of A Case of Me, or Case of You, excuse me.
Just before our love got lost, you said, I am as constant as a northern star. And I said, constant in the darkness, where's that at? If you want me, I'll be in the bar. On the back of a cartoon coaster, in the blue TV screen light, I drew a map of Canada, oh Canada, with your face sketched on it twice. Oh, you're in my bloodline, holy wine, you taste so bitter and so sweet. Oh, I could drink a case of you, darling. I would still be on my feet, I would still be on my feet.
Okay, got a few more slides for you. The next 3 slides are each of a classical music female composer that also composes classical guitar music. So let's stop here before we get into these last few slides, and just stop if we have any questions or comments.
Yeah, one question we have in here is, it seems like just playing the guitar at all for women is sometimes perceived as a rebellious act. Do you think that has historically made female guitarists more likely to be activists?
I think that's a great question, and I think the answer is yes. I think everyone has their sort of own level, and whether it's more subtle or whether it's direct or indirect. But I think the answer is yes, and I'm not so sure that's limited to just women. I just think maybe, and it probably doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out, but any marginalized group that has the safety in their own, physical and emotional safety in their own life to do that, I think does.
And then we just
Other
have
questions? Yeah, go ahead.
not another question, but a comment that just says, I never thought about how versatile the guitar is until now. This workshop is so interesting.
Thanks. I mean, even the way Joni was playing, the guitar there, the stringed instrument, it's just like, if you noticed it, she had it on her lap. What's the guitarist that plays with Alison Krauss? What's his name? What's his name? That's going to bug me. If anyone can think of it, Alison Krauss, the singer, Jerry Douglas, he plays similar. Yeah. So there's, it is just like, in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of genres, and all sorts of string combinations. It's just really exciting that way. There's always something kind of new and interesting to, dive into guitar in a different way you hadn't before. Okay, on to some composers. So Libby Larsen, she's definitely one of my favorite composers in general. She's a contemporary American classical composer. She's gay, she's queer. I was first introduced to her music in undergrad. It was a flute or clarinet and guitar duet that I performed. And I remember getting the piece and doing some research about her and listening to other compositions she did. And I was like, wow, this is, really, really good music. And she's a really interesting person. Her style and approach to music comes from her own philosophy on music. Comes from the sound she hears in everyday life around her and around the world. It's noted for its energy, optimism, rhythmic diversity, colorful orchestration. Her tonality is generally tonal, but it's not, it's not like she doesn't do anything interesting at all. She certainly does. Doesn't have a lot of harsh dissonance, and she composes some of the most beautiful melodies I've heard. So let's take a little bit of a listen of that.
I am right where I belong.
I've heard there was a sacred chord that David played and it pleased.
So I'll talk a little bit about this particular channel to illuminate women's music. It's sort of like a blog, or I don't know if you call it a vlog, if that's online, where they write about articles and perform, works of women composers and performers. So Libby Larsen, of course, is one. I know I just said she composes some really beautiful melodies, and she certainly does. This composition probably is going to sound kind of harsh. I played this composition in undergrad, and I'm doing even more research on it actually right now. Sarabande in Profane Style. So basically, she's taking the general compositional attributes of a sarabande, and keeping some of it, and then going against some of it, adhering to some of it and rejecting some of it in a very 21st century way. So let's take a little bit of a listen of that. Yeah, and I wish I could play more, but we're already almost at 8:30 here. So let's keep it rolling for the next two slides. Okay, Thea Musgrave, a Scottish composer, very known for opera, but also classical music as well. She has lived in the United States since the 70s. She's known for her clarity of her invention, her skill of orchestrations, and power of musical communication. She's also definitely known for her drama. Her compositions can be, I mean, of course, she's an opera composer, so that sort of tracks. But she does interesting things even like in some of her concertos. It's written in that like the performers, whether it's the soloist or the orchestra, are supposed to get up and physically move around. So she's sort of all about that drama and kind of all about that. We think every generation, like, who are the musicians, who are the composers that are really pushing things outside the boundary. And I think she's like certainly someone who does that, like maybe not in every single second of every single piece all the time, but she absolutely has her moments of drama and kind of inventing something that hasn't really necessarily happened before. So let's listen to a little bit. So this is one of her guitar compositions of it's like electronic music, right? Like guitar and tape that she's composed. And even that, like super inventive, and for someone who knows a lot about like classical guitar music, I mean, now there's much more compositions like that out there, but still not a lot, and especially in electronic music way like that. Okay, and last but certainly not least, Barbara Kolb, an American composer. My guitar professor knows her quite well. Her music uses sound masses and often creates vertical structures through simultaneous rhythmic or melodic units, motifs, or figures. So that kind of just means she's using melodies, rhythms, and harmonies as like a block of sound often in her music. Her musical style can be identified by using colorful textures, very impressionistic. She generally composes in an atonal way, which means she's not using like a typical Western scalar system. Like she's not composing in D major or C major or F minor. She's kind of using pitches as she chooses, and she can kind of choose to make something sound really harsh and dissonant, or she can choose to make something sound, really lyrical and melodic if she wishes as well. And sometimes it can happen, within the same 10 bars, same 10 measures. She's also very influenced by like sort of other arts, such as like the visual arts and literature. She was the first American woman composer to win the Rome Prize, which is a humongous deal. And she's also written guitar pieces for my professor, Lily Afshar. So let's bring that. This is called Broken Slurs, and it's performed. Let me just let the YouTube go first.
You overcompensating a little bit?
Ghirardelli chocolate chips makes baking a bite better.
So this piece was composed for my professor Lily Afshar, and this is on her album Possession, and this is the album cover, Broken Slurs. And that is it. That's all I got. Any questions? I'm popping on the Zoom now since I can come on the chat.
It was amazing. We just have, thank you for the opportunity to listen and learn about several female guitarists. That was
No,
amazing.
thanks for having me. Thanks. I had a lot of fun. And thank you for being flexible with my technology. I'm going to just have to get a new laptop one of these days because this thing is just giving me trouble. But I'm happy I have an iPhone.
Cool. No, it was really great, and thank you so much to Jess for putting together that presentation for us and for allowing us to record it and to share it with the Girls Rock Detroit community. We hope to have you back again, talking about more guitar themed things and events and workshops and all those good things.
I'd love that. I would absolutely love that.
Thanks so much.
Sweet. Yes. And Debbie, I'm really happy you joined us. Thank you.